The time is now 5:03 p.m. I'm going to call to order the Monday, March 6, 2023, Special Finance and Purchasing Committee public hearing for the fiscal year 2023 and 2024 Budget and Appropriations Ordinance. Roll call, please.
Alderman Newsom.
Present.
Alderman Mosio. Alderman Hayes.
Coming in the elevator right now. Can we come back to him?
Alderman Florian.
Present.
Alderman Rivera. Alderman Hayes. Here. You have a quorum, ma'am.
Thank you. We have no old business, new business. Item 3A, public hearing regarding budget appropriations ordinance and revenue certification for the fiscal year May 1, 2023 to April 30th, 2024. Item B, are there, we just open the meeting now? Turn it over to Finance Director, Mr. Don Schultz.
Got to talk in the mic, or we won't get you.
That'll be fine. All right, the purpose of the public hearing is to review what we're proposing for the fiscal year 24 annual budget. It begins May 1 of 2023. First place we should look is how we finished the prior year, where we are right now and what we're proposing for the new year. In fiscal year 22, which was the prior year, revenues exceeded expenditures in the general fund and in the water and sewer fund. All departments were under budget last fiscal year. We established a fixed asset replacement fund, and we deposited $6 million into the fund at the start of this year. That fund is to be used to replace our aging and antiquated, fully depreciated vehicles and equipment. We had record sales tax, income tax, corporate replacement taxes in fiscal year 22. There was no increase in the total property tax levy last fiscal year. In the current fiscal year, our tax base shows an increase of 6.1% in the valuation of our property. We're expecting another 8% increase on the next tax year. This year's budget included 6 new firefighters, 6 new police officers, and projects a stabilization fund to reach 9.2% by year end. Our target is 8%. We will be $1.2 million over our target at the end of fiscal year 24. Revenues are projected to exceed expenditures in the general fund and also in the water and sewer utility. We expect to transfer $4 million out of the general fund prior to the end of this year and place it in the fixed asset replacement fund. We would like that fund to hold between $7 and $10 million. And that'll take care of our public works, vehicles and equipment, fire department, and police department over the next several years. This year has been another record year for retail sales tax, home rule sales tax, as well as the corporate property replacement tax, all as a resurgence from the COVID pandemic. Highlights for next budget year: our total citywide expenditures are projected to reach $217.1 million. That's approximately 8% below the current year's budget. Revenues will exceed citywide expenditures by $1.6 million. I've never seen that. This is either my 39th or 40th budget and to see where, on a citywide level, where revenues exceed expenditures. So it's quite a promising year coming up. There will be no property tax increase again this year. We are proposing a $31 million capital improvement budget, a $3.5 million budget to replace vehicles and equipment in the fire department, in the police department, and in public works. We're proposing $1.6 million to pave the public works parking lot, to build a new animal shelter, and a beach house. There will be $0 in debt financing for capital projects. They will all be financed through funds on hand, through water and sewer sales and fees, through American Rescue Plan monies, and through the spending down of our 2020 water and sewer revenue bond. The general fund will exceed expenditures by $4.8 million this year. $4.1 million of that will be transferred out of the general fund. $3 million will be transferred to fund street projects. $1 million will be transferred out in support of fixed asset replacements. $80,000 will be transferred out as a local share of a brownfield grant, so we can clean up the Market Street brownfield. The general fund will end this year with a $700,000 increase to our net position. We will retire $8 million in GO bonds and water and sewer revenue bonds. The stabilization fund, as we said, will finish the year at 9.3%, $1.2 million over the target. New in the budget, actually it happened this year, we had the SAFER grant for the fire department to hire another 3 firefighters. It puts the total complement at 123 professional firefighters, which is, I think, a record in Waukegan. This budget also includes the hiring of 5 additional police officers, putting that number at 163. And we put a link in this year's budget between each individual department budget and the city's overall strategic plan. Our strategic plan is to concentrate on financial stability, sustainability, economic growth, infrastructures, and utilities. Of a $217 million budget, 44% of it is for the general fund. The general fund is your primary operating fund of the city. It accounts for the building department, central services, police, fire, public works, planning, zoning and development, building. 44% of the budget goes for that, $95 million. $9 million for debt service, which is $3 million below last year's level. It'll go down again next year when we're paying off another bond this year. Special revenue funds are funds that are assigned for a particular purpose. They're restricted in use because of a grant or by ordinance or by certain stipulations that money can be used for only for certain purposes. Some of the funds, the motor fuel tax fund is a special revenue fund, the library fund, our 5 TIF districts, our American Rescue Plan money. We'll have a new special revenue fund this year, the co-responder grant, $2.3 million for our police department to allow us to hire the 3 police officers and 3 social workers so they can respond to mental health concerns that police respond to on a daily basis. Our capital project budget, there's 2 capital project funds. One is for fixed asset replacements, one is for streets. Those 2 funds will fund $10 million. The other $20.5 million is going to be paid out of special revenue funds and water and sewer utility to bring it to $31 million. Fiduciary funds, we serve as a trustee for our 2 pension funds, our police pension fund and our firefighters pension fund. 9% of the total budget, $19 million. Enterprise funds are funds that are business type. They raise their own revenues, they pay their own bills. We have 2 enterprise funds, the water and sewer utility and the parking system. That budget is 13% of the total at $29 million. And internal service funds are our insurance funds, risk management, health insurance, liability insurance, 8% of the total budget. Yep. When you compare fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 23, the general fund will go up 3.5%, which is really a small amount when you consider that 80% of the general fund budget is personnel costs, personnel compensation, and all the benefits that go with personnel. 80% of the budget is people related. Debt service funds will go down by 29%, go down by $3 million because we paid off 2 bonds last year. Special revenue funds will go down 36%, primarily the motor fuel tax fund and our TIF funds. Capital projects will double in size from 5 million to 10. Fiduciary will show a slight increase. Enterprise funds, a decrease of 13 million, only because we had budgeted so much in water and sewer capital projects last year. Many of those projects weren't able to get started and were deferred over to this year. And the internal service funds will show an increase of 7. But altogether, the total budget will decrease 8% compared to the prior year. When you look at the total budget, you wonder, where does the money come from? Well, almost 60% of the total funding of a $218 million budget comes from taxes. You would expect that to be the case. Taxes and fees. Intergovernmental revenue, very significant, $10.7 million next year. We'll review those in a few minutes. You can see where the money's coming from, in support from federal, state, and local sources. Water and sewer, we'll have $17 million in water and sewer fees. Interest earnings, we are now earning 3.5 to 3.75% on our available cash that we have invested. The lion's share of the interest earnings will be in the police and fire pension funds. Premium contributions, those are contributions the city makes to the health insurance fund and to risk management to cover the premiums for workers' compensation, liability, and the various insurance funds. In terms of taxes, $128.7 million of a $217 million budget is covered by taxes. Property taxes, it shows $55.5 million, but there should be a note on that. 18 million of that is double counted. We have to count the property taxes that are levied for police and fire pensions, both in the fiduciary fund and in the police department and the fire department in their own budget to get a true accounting of what public safety costs are. Sales taxes, we're projecting $12 million in sales taxes and another 11.6 in home rule sales taxes. Incremental property taxes, those are taxes that we gained from our TIF districts, the 5 TIF districts. The cannabis excise tax, it's our first year. It's an estimate based on a presentation that we received from one of the vendors. The local use tax, utility tax proceeds, you can see all that. Income tax, another $12 million, 9%. Replacement taxes at 6.6%. And the various other sources. Gaming admissions taxes, if you heard the presentation we made about a month ago, this is the estimate provided by our outside consultant, by Convergence. This is not the number supplied by Full House Resorts, but by an outside consultant that the city contracted with to give us a conservative estimate of gaming revenues. Motor fuel taxes at $2 million, and a transportation renewal tax, which is part of the governor's plan to put more money for infrastructures, for street repairs. Intergovernmental revenue is support that we get from other government bodies, ordinarily from the federal or state government. Illinois Department of Transportation, District 60, that's really a reimbursement for police officer services. Illinois Department of Human Services for youth employment grant, a violence prevention grant, a highway safety grant, tobacco grant. You can see the various grants. Our departments have been very busy in applying for whatever grants they can. All the departments look very carefully at federal and state sources of support. We're trying to reach out and gain as much support as we can from the Illinois legislature and from the federal government, and also from Lake County and the Council of Mayors. The co-responder grant, you see that one. CDBG, $1.4 million. Senator Durbin has been able to help us with $500,000. This year we'll get, or next year at least, $1 million from Congressman Schneider's efforts, with more from Congressman Schneider to come in the following year. Total expenditures, 217, total revenues, 218.7. Revenues over citywide expenditures by 1.6 million. The general fund will have revenues of 100.5 million, expenditures of only 95.7, a $4.8 million surplus. We're taking 4.1 million of that and transferring it to the street program for street projects, for fixed asset replacements, and for the brownfield grant. We'll end the year on a positive note of 700,000. Special revenue funds will dip into certain reserves and special revenue funds to cover the $35 million in planned expenditures. Debt service is ordinarily a wash. Revenues and expenditures are ordinarily equal. This year we have a debt service reserve fund, $55,000 we're projecting for interest earnings in that fund. Capital projects, we're going to spend down some of the balance in that fund so we can continue the projects that weren't completed last year. Enterprise funds, again, we'll use some of the reserves in the water and sewer fund. Internal service funds, what goes in comes out. We put money in there to cover the premiums. The money comes out in premiums. Fiduciary funds ordinarily should show a positive balance due to investment earnings in the police and fire pension funds. Just because we show a deficit in 3 of those fund types doesn't mean it's a true deficit. We have liquid assets. We have assets in cash available to cover. Special revenue funds right now have $40.7 million in reserve funds. We need 3.2 million of that to cover the projects of special revenues. Special revenue funds, they collect money over a period of years. You don't always spend the money in the same year you receive it. A lot of this is grant money. It may be taxes that are reserved for a particular purpose. You may receive it at one time and not spend it over a period of time. Capital projects, the same thing. We put money in the capital project fund. Whatever projects we're able to complete, we do. Otherwise, the money carries over to future years. The capital project funds have a balance of $8 million. We're only going to pull 3.2 million from that balance. Enterprise funds, you can see, has $49 million in liquid assets. $9 million will cover the amount of expenditures over and above the revenues that come in a single year. 2 ways of balancing budgets. One, they're structurally balanced when you have revenues equal to or greater than expenditures. 4 of the 7 fund types are structurally balanced. You always want the general fund to be structurally balanced. You want the revenues always to be equal to or greater than expenditures in your general fund. Debt service funds will have a positive. Internal service and fiduciary. Those are all structurally balanced. The other 3 funds are balanced, but they're balanced by using revenues within those funds and unassigned reserves that are sitting in the fund that are not assigned for other purposes. In addition to fund balances that we maintain balances in our general fund. And it's always been my practice to try to maintain 25% in reserves in the general fund. But in addition to fund balances within our particular funds, the City Council several years ago set up a stabilization fund. They wanted assurances that we would be covered in case of a rainy day. It's a rainy day fund. It's a reserve fund. It's a fund for emergencies. If revenues fall short, if you have an unforeseen emergency that you couldn't budget for, we want to make sure we have the money on hand to cover those unforeseen emergencies. It's also money in case of a recession, in case there's an economic downturn. We want to be prepared. We are prepared with a stabilization fund and reserves in our specific fund types. We will not leave ourselves short-handed. Capital projects, $31 million in capital projects. We're talking bridges, culverts, streets, water plant improvements, pumping station improvements, street rehab, sidewalk replacements. You see, we're using American Rescue Plan monies for some culvert work, water main replacements, the River Road water loop, street rehab, Glen Rock culvert, lead service line replacements, River Glen gas main extension. CBG is going to contribute towards lead line replacements, towards beach improvements, towards broadband improvements. $4 million will come from motor fuel tax, Rebuild Illinois funds, and service transportation grants. Bridge inspections, not only the inspections, not only the engineering, but you'll actually see the shovels in the ground this year. Most of the money on capital projects this year, unlike last year where a lot of it went for engineering, a lot of the money is going to be used on actual construction projects. You'll see the trucks out there, you see the excavators, you'll see the shovels at work. The Washington Street corridor will get started. Various rehab residential streets with money from the service transportation grants. The Metro line and the Pace line. We have the capital improvement fund for streets and sidewalks, another $4.7 million. Water and sewer will have almost $16 million in projects. $3.9 million. The far column on the left comes from actual, or you see the second column, that's from actual fees, water and sewer fees that we're collecting during the year. $3.9 million will come from that for lead service line replacement. You see the storm sewer repairs, sanitary sewer repairs, the data processing system, the SCADA system for $1.7 million. We're going to spend $8.2 million, which is almost the balance left in the 2020 water sewer revenue bonds. Again, we're going to have the River Road water main looping, a Lewis Avenue developed vault replacement, raw water pump station improvements, reservoir improvements, booster station water pressure zone modifications. In total, $31 million in projects. In addition to actual projects, we are spending $3.5 million for the replacement of fire department ambulance, 10 unmarked police vehicles, small public works equipment, a service truck, an easement machine, a salt dome, a street sweeper, an aerial bucket truck, a dump truck, a plow truck. You see the vehicles and equipment we're trying to take care of in public works. That has basically been denied these acquisitions over prior years because we didn't have the funding for it. We have the funding now. We want to do what we can for public works and also for police and fire. We have a 5-year program that we're working on now for the replacement of our assets. And that's the purpose of this fixed asset replacement fund, so we can have $3 million a year at least to go towards that purpose. Total budget by fund type. The general fund, it looks as if the fire department is getting less. It looks like the police department is a small amount. Planning less, public works less. That's deceiving. What's actually happening is that we're moving a lot of expenses out of those departments for IT. The IT department provides a lot of services that apply to a whole citywide network. We're taking those costs out of the individual departments and putting it into the IT department, which is in central services, which is why central services shows a $3 million increase, and the rest will show slight decreases. Believe me, we are not shortchanging police and fire, as you'll soon see. You'll see the capital project funds compared to the prior year, up 57%. Debt service funds going down $3 million. They will go down again next year because we're paying off one of our bonds again this year. So it'll go down again next year. Enterprise funds. Enterprise Funds consist of the water and sewer up on top with expenditures of $28.5 million. 2.8 of that is for paying principal and interest on an outstanding revenue bond. About $10 million in operating costs. The rest are capital projects. And the parking system pays its own way through its own parking system fines and fees and sales. Internal service funds will show an increase. It shows an increase because they're trying to put money into our risk management fund. We need to have a reserve. It's hard as a municipality to avoid lawsuits. They seem to be common. We can't make an arrest without lawsuits. We try to be careful. We try to do the best job we can. We're trying to build our reserves in that fund so that we can protect ourselves from future occurrences. Fiduciary funds, that pays the police pension and fire pension costs. The total citywide, 8% reduction over the prior year. The general fund is the primary operating fund of the city. You can see that. General government, 11%. Almost 74% of the general fund budget is for public safety. It's for police and fire. You see where the concentration is. Police, fire, public works. Special revenue funds are special in the sense that they're restricted to their intended use. Revenues will equal $37.4 million. They come from property taxes for refuse collection in the library, motor fuel taxes, incremental taxes for the TIF districts, state and federal grants, fees and forfeitures. We will spend $35.6 million, but we will transfer out of those funds $5 million. $3 million will come from the McGaw TIF to pay principal and interest on the TIF bonds. And $2.2 million will come out of the home rule sales tax fund to pay principal and interest on home rule sales tax bonds. $3.3 million will come from reserves in the special revenue funds. Debt service funds covers the principal and interest and outstanding debt. Outstanding debt as of the end of 21 was $107.3 million. At the end of last year, down to $97 million, down by 9.7%. At the end of this year, it'll be 88.2. At the end of the next budget year, 82.6. In the year after, 77. These bonds are paid off in the year 2032. You can see that the amount of debt service paid from property taxes, you'll see a decline next year. It'll go from 3.9 to 3.2 in next year's levy. Then it'll even out at about $4 million for 4 years until it takes another tumble. And it will continue to decline until the bonds are all paid off. You can see on the chart, debt service on the bonds, what appears on your tax bill. You can see it, how significantly it's declining. Total general obligation debt is the bonds that we have outstanding of 82.7. We have a special assessment out at Fountain Square. We have a parking meter lease for $84 million can be called general obligation debt. Another $30 million in water and sewer bonded debt. Total debt for the citywide is $114 million. Water and sewer will show total revenue of $19 million, approximately $17.5 million in water sales and fees, another $2 million or so in grants and support from other sources. $10 million to go for operations, $2.8 million for debt service, almost $16 million on water and sewer related capital projects. Police and fire pension funds, we talked about those already. We are committed and we're required by statute to have our police and fire pension funds at 90% funded by the year 2040. Right now, we're halfway there. We have ways to go, but we levy the amount that is recommended by our actuary on an annual basis. In addition to that, we put in 100% of our video gaming tax. This year alone is $1.5 million. So it's $160 million unfunded liability in police, which is 45% funded. It's $111 million unfunded in fire, which is 46% funded. We are on track to hit the 90% by the year 2040. Just a brief note on our TIF districts. We have 5 TIF districts. These are set up without a TIF, development would not take place. They have grown by 73% in terms of the increase in their tax base. And finally, so that you all can see it, your property tax bill. 75% of your property taxes are paid to 8 other taxing bodies, not to the city of Waukegan. Waukegan is 25% of your tax bill. The other 8 taxing bodies get 25%. And then the key points that we already went over. Revenues will exceed expenditures by 1.6. General fund budget is structurally balanced. Stabilization fund at 9.3%. The budget is conservative, it's responsible, it is sustainable. We strengthen public safety. We have a program to rotate our assets in police, fire, and public works. We have a $31 million capital improvement program. No increase in property taxes, no new debt. And I ran over, and I'm sorry. Any easy questions? Thank you.
Are there any questions? All right. Can I take a motion to,
Well, it's a public hearing,
Oh.
so you should ask if there's any
Are there any
comments
questions
or questions. from the-
comments from the audience? Hearing none.
You can have a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll take a motion to close the public hearing by Alderman Hayes, second by
Alderman Florian?
Alderman Florian. Are all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The public hearing is closed. Now, can I get a motion to close the Finance Committee? So moved. Motion by Alderman Hayes,
Second. You're not
second
on
by Alderman Florian.
She's not on the committee.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Adjourned at 5:37.